Okay, great. So today we're going to talk about what is known as prior written notice. PWN is the acronym used. So PWN comes from IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is the federal law governing special education. And under this section 300.503 of IDEA is where it lists that prior written notice must be given for the following reasons: to propose or begin or change. So propose to begin or change the identification, the evaluation, or the educational placement, or the provision of FAPE. Also, to refuse to begin or change the identification, evaluation, or educational placement, or the provision of FAPE. So here's the site where you can link to see this federal regulation. And again, it's all these different provisions when the prior written notice should be used. The federal law also states that it must be specific to the child and the situation. So it should not be just a generic written notice. And it's telling you parents must be informed in writing. So you must get this in writing, not just a verbal or a conversation. And parents may exercise their procedural safeguards. And those procedural safeguards are your rights to the process with the IEP. So in Pennsylvania, the prior written notice is known as the NOREP, and that is the Notice of Recommended Educational Placement. It is the form that is used to comply with the IDEA requirement. So it gets a little confusing, but the NOREP satisfies that IDEA requirement for prior written notice in Pennsylvania. So the NOREP should be used when proposing or refusing a change to the IEP. It is not only for placement, which can be confusing at times because placement is in the title of this document. And sometimes, you may have some confusion or pushback about using the NOREP because it's not a placement change. But it needs to include, and should be used for all these different areas: identification, evaluation, and placement, and FAPE. And we will get into FAPE on the future slide here today. So schools must provide this form in a reasonable time, and parents must sign and return it within 10 days. And a reasonable amount of time is usually considered. It's not defined under the law, but it's a reasonable time is usually 10 days as well. But the parent must return the form within 10 days. So what is FAPE? So FAPE is a free and appropriate public education, which is guaranteed. And these things apply to FAPE. Public expense. So there should not be any cost to the family or the parent to provide the education. It is free at public expense. Appropriate is individual to the student and their needs. This should be determined on an individual basis. So no student should be categorized with services based on their diagnosis or their disability. The education should be and needs to be tailored to the IEP goals. So that keyword of appropriate is really important. Public school system. So public education should take place in this child's neighborhood school with non-disabled peers, as much as possible, to the greatest extent possible, I believe they refer to as. But that should be what's considered first and foremost. So that is the E for or for P for the public school system. And then education is to prepare the child for future employment, further education, and independent living with all necessary supports and services. So education, that's the goal of education, is to prepare for all these areas. So it's a really wide encompassing level of education that is guaranteed to students. So the term FAPE is discussed and thrown around a lot. And often. It is what is guaranteed under IDEA, but the interpretation can often be different. There may be times when you, as the parent, feel the offer is not FAPE, but the district feels it is a FAPE, and a disagreement could occur. So just remember, FAPE does include special education and related services, an individualized IEP, and the least restrictive environment based on needs. It's never on availability of staff or the building layout or any kind of outside extenuating circumstances in those areas. So we're going to go through now some examples of the need to use the NOREP, including possible provisions of FAPE. So again, remember, it's that interpretation of a FAPE. So whether the parent or the school initiates the changes, the NOREP can be used. So it's not just when the school district initiates a change, it's for the school district or the parent requests a change. So school district initiates change. So we're going to go through a few examples here. One would be proposing an IEP. So in this example we're going to use today, we'll say, so you had your initial evaluation for special education, and now the school proposes that your child does qualify and they're going to have an IEP. So they will have to initiate a NOREP for that reason. Exiting an IEP. The district states your child, for example, no longer needs an IEP. So I would be sure if they propose that they demonstrate that they have met their goals and any reevaluations were conducted to prove that the change should be made. It shouldn't just be, oh, we're not going to have the service anymore. Oh, we're not going to need special education anymore. So you definitely would have to have that NOREP upon exiting the IEP, and graduation is also an exit of an IEP. Another one is refusing or agreeing to an reevaluation or independent evaluation. So, we discussed these if you were at the prior training with the permission to reevaluate and evaluates. If you weren't there, you can check our website, our YouTube channel out to view that. But if they're refusing or they're agreeing, then the NOREP would be issued. Change of placement, changing the placement of the child, including involving some forms of discipline that falls under the category of a change in placement. Not all discipline issues will fall under that. But we actually are having an upcoming training on discipline in the manifestation process, if you're interested in more information on that next week, where we'll dive into that in more details. A change in a qualifying disability would also be a need for the NOREP. So adding or changing the disability category. So for example, your child had some further evaluation and testing, and now they qualify as intellectual disability as well as their former diagnosis and disability category of autism. So if they're changing that or adding something, or you no longer qualify under this category, but you're still going to receive speech and language, you qualify under that category, and they're removing something, that would be another reason for school-initiated changes requiring NOREP. And then proposals for extended school year services. So when you go through extended school year and it's decided if you do qualify or not, you should get a NOREP for that. So now here's some of the parent requested changes. And this is often sometimes a parent requests something that they believe is needed in order for a FAPE, and the district is just saying no, but they're not issuing the NOREP. You want to make sure that some of these areas, including are impacting FAPE, that you can ask for that NOREP. You can ask for that denial or that agreement to be put on the NOREP. That could include things such as changes to the specially designed instruction or the related services. So if your child needs a special accommodation or a modification or some type of instruction that impacts their ability and access to have a free and appropriate public education, then you can ask for that to be on the NOREP. So for example, if you feel that your child needs this instructional aid one-on-one in order to make meaningful progress against their IEP goals, and you have the data and the progress to show that what they're doing currently is not working, you can certainly ask for that and then ask for it to be supplied on the NOREP. Also, a refusal to add or agree to a parent request, such as a program or an evaluation that you requested. Say you requested a certain type of evaluation and the district is saying, no, we can't do that, or we're not gonna be able to provide that. Then you can ask for it to be on the NOREP, because that NOREP is going to provide your procedural safeguards, as we discussed earlier, that you have rights. So you're going to want to make sure you have that form. Also, if the district places your child in a private school and they're going to be following the IEP there, that would also require a NOREP. So next is, we're just going to go through a little bit of the form line by line, because there's a lot of information on there and it could be confusing as to what you're agreeing and signing to. So before you do anything, when you get that form, you're going to have to remember you must sign. We hear all the time at the ARC with advocacy this misconception that you don't have to sign. I didn't sign the NOREP, I didn't sign the IEP, and that's I didn't agree to it, but that is not how the process works. So it's very important that you sign. So when you're going to sign the form, you're going to want to double check the dates that's on there because that's very important. And that the dates are correct because of the timelines. You're going to check your child's name and your address and your phone number for any errors and mistakes because that does happen. Things don't get updated in the systems. You're going to have a signature line there where you're going to sign. And is everything listed on there that you agreed to from the meeting? I mean, you don't have to sign it that day at the meeting and they can revise it to the understanding that you guys made about your child. You can also write on the NOREP, say, it's not sort of sounds correct, but it's missing a little bit of the wording, or you just want to confirm that it's your understanding is exactly what's on there. So you can write on there. This is my understanding. This is something that was missing. I agree upon everything in here except this small piece. It becomes part of your child's records. You're going to want to check one of the options. And this is where, you have to sign. Either you approve, you don't approve, or you would like another informal meeting to discuss. If you do not approve, you're going to have to check a meeting, a mediation, or due process. And remember, you don't have to sign it that day at the meeting, but you must sign and return it within 10 days, or the district will move forward with their proposal then. And that's what will stand. So here's the sections of the NOREP. So this is where you could follow along with the annotated copy if you'd like. And we will give you a brief example of each section. So first would be the personal information as discussed on the last slide. Double check all of that. The next section will, it'll be a little bit of a blurb that will say that the local education agency is proposing this action for your child. And then it's going to have a list of the actions taken. And that's where there's going to be a list of the most common reasons. And that's some of the ones we discussed previously, which was like proposing an initial special education offering for an IEP, a refusal to initiate, a proposed change to the identification, evaluation, or educational placement, or a refusal of those, change of placement for disciplinary reasons, due process or expedited hearing, graduation from high school, exiting special education, exiting high school due to the age eligibility and ESY, and also an independent educational evaluation. They will all be listed there. But then at the bottom, there's also another box that should be listed that says other. And then in that box, they may check that if it's something outside of this scope, and it may say, there's not, revision meeting to change a few programs or accommodations, revision meeting to discuss behavior and plans updated, or annual IEP meeting, just if it's a basic NOREP, it may say something like that. So you're just going to want to double check the types of action that was taken. And then next, they'll have a description of the action, either proposed or refused by the school. So if, for example, their child is no longer going to be needing an IEP, it will say the proposed action is that, Johnny is no longer in need of an IEP or special education services. And then the next box will be an explanation of why. So why is that action being taken? So the actions listed, then the explanation. And in there, it says should describe why. And it should be, a few sentences and should really just make a good description so someone would understand the reasons why. So for this example, he has met his goals in these areas. A reevaluation results indicated he's no longer in need of the specially designed instruction. At this time, he's going to move to a 504, as he prepares for college. So, there's going to have a description of why in that box. Next would be other options considered and why they were not chosen. So then it's going to list it, maybe, for example, keeping the itinerant learning support, increasing the support. It's going to list a few other things that this is an example. So it's going to, sometimes it'll say on there, if it's just a standard IEP meeting, it might say like, for your child supplemental autistic support. It might say other options considered were full-time autistic support, itinerant, regular education with no support, like it may list a couple of the options, and then it will also say why they were rejected. And it usually lists, they don't offer the correct levels of support. They're not needed at this time due to some testing that was shown, and it's going to list the explanation why. Maybe explain any further evaluations would come on the next box. So it may be even more detailed in the next section, where it will say any evaluations, assessments, and reports that were used for this decision. And they will list any of the tests administered, progress monitoring of goals were met, etc. The next box will list any other factors that were relevant to the proposal or refusal. So in this section, it might list some of the things that you've been working on. Say some adjustments that have been made to the IEP that are influencing this option. So that could list any additional things. And that's where you could sort of also write in some of the things that your understanding is, or your agreement is. It's not exactly clear on there, but you feel that you could clear it up by just adding an extra sentence or two. You could put that in the any other factors section. The next section is the placement recommended. And this will always list the type, which is the 13 different categories: learning support, life skills, emotional support, deaf and hearing impaired, blind and visually impaired, speech and language, physical, autistic support, multiple disabilities. So one of them or more than one will be listed in this area. They can't be making up, or they should not be making up a category or renaming something life skills / this, or a different type of name that's not listed under the regulations. But you can have more than one. It may say initial placement category of autistic support, a secondary of speech and language. Sometimes there's even a third category. But then the next section should be the amount, and that should be itinerant less than 20%, supplemental more than 20 but less than 80, or full-time more than 80% of the day. Next would be the district signature. It will most likely be the superintendent or the CEO, the head person of the school district. And then a section there also where it would say you're like case manager, or your contact person to submit the form. Procedural safeguards notice that you were provided with them. Again, that's a really important piece of this if you don't agree. And parental consent would be signed here in the corresponding boxes where to return it. And then another very important part that should be accompanying this, and that you should also keep in mind as parents, is that there's a list of resources that are given to families. If you get confused, you need help through this process, there's a number of them, and they have to be provided by the district to let you know. The ARC of PA, the consult line, Office of Dispute Resolution, Disability Rights PA, HUNE, PEAL, Right to Education State Task Force, Public Interest Law Center, Patent, and the PA Bar Association should be listed with their contact information when they give this to you. Okay, so next slide. So if you disagree, now what? So there's a few things you could do if you're not agreeing at the meeting and you don't feel comfortable moving forward. So now what? So one is you can ask for another meeting if you disagree. If you think you're going to be able to work it out and you just need a little more time, and bring in a couple more experts or a couple more people to discuss things, you can just request another meeting. Do not approve, but ask for another meeting. Right on the NOREP what you disagree with. If you only partial, or request a separate NOREP for that provision. So instead of lumping everything on this one NOREP, you can certainly say to them, like, okay, I agree to this. I'd like NOREP for that. We're going to hold off a little bit on the other aspect to have another meeting, and we'll discuss that moving forward. Again, you can request due process or mediation if you do not agree and you feel it's very contentious. You will have to check that box, and then you will, in addition, we also have to call the Office of Dispute Resolution. So it's like a two-step process. So some people think, they just checked mediation, it's just going to happen, but no, you have to call. And when you call, you're going to ask for stay put, which is known as pendency. So that remains the last placement remains, and nothing can be changed or at that time. Um, another option that is facilitated IEP. So if the district will agree to it, and you feel like some of it's like a little bit of a gets into like a little heated, or people can't seem to agree, or certain members handle things a different way that doesn't make you feel comfortable, you can ask for this facilitation, and it helps keep members of the IEP team focused on the development of the IEP while addressing conflicts and disagreements that may arise at the meeting. And it just keeps the meeting flowing and everybody working together as best as possible. So it's a new practice, but it's been so far some research I did on it shows that it's growing, and it's been effective in many situations, not all, but many. So if changes were made without the NOREP, so if you find out something happened and changes were made to your child and education, and you never even knew about it and you didn't get a NOREP, so now what? So first thing is ask why. So, it's better not to make any assumptions. It's better to go and find out what happened and why these changes were made and why you weren't notified. So, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the disciplinary reasons, they're not obligated to have the NORP for all of them, but if it's, you're going to have a manifestation determination hearing, if they were suspended a certain amount of consecutive times, there's reasons when the NOREP will be used versus when it's not needed. Again, we're having the training on that next week. If you'd like to attend, it's going to be very comprehensive in the area of discipline and manifestation. So you can ask why I didn't get the NOREP. There's a disciplinary issue. I need to be notified. The NOREP is not needed for everything. So it's not needed for, again, you have to really look at it under the lens of FAPE. It's not needed for like a class schedule change that's not affecting the placement supplemental itinerant. It's not needed for like, progress monitoring or some small, simple changes to the SDIs or assignment changes. It's not, as we mentioned in our last training for reevals and evals, it's just doing a screening, regular testing that everyone is subject to. You're not going to need the NOREP for that. And sometimes a trial or a strategy that you agreed to on a case-by-case basis or for a small amount of time, you might not need the NOREP for that either. Again, if you're not sure, there's resources to help you. If you call the Office of Dispute Resolution, a consult line, they can certainly help you try to wade through that questions of the NOREP being used or not. There's another option, which is the state complaint. If they refuse to give you the NOREP and you feel it's an issue, and it's something that is affecting FAPE or placement or one of the other reasons listed, and they're not giving it to you, and they do not use it correctly, any regulation procedures that are not being followed, you can certainly look into doing a state complaint for that. So list what changes you have requested and why you believe a NOREP is necessary. So you can always, like, if you don't want to go right to the state complaint or the Office of Dispute Resolution, you can just go back to your teachers, case manager, special ed director and say, these are the changes that we agreed to and requested, and I believe they should be on a NOREP for this reason, and ask for it in writing. Because again, it's often underutilized, and sometimes schools and staffs aren't sure exactly what, there's the confusion over what is FAPE and what is not an issue with FAPE. So if you believe it is, certainly ask for it to be on there. So right now, we're just going to, we went through this very quickly. Again, these sessions are designed to break down each form or each section of the IEP. So we're going to allow some time for questions. We really thank you for attending and participating with us today. And we're going to have the recording and the materials sent to you so that you can refer to them. Our goal is really to make parents as informed as best as possible that we can. We advocates here at the ARC are also all parents of special education students, so we do get it from the parent perspective as well as the professional side of things. But our goal is really to inform you so you can better advocate for your child and hopefully help them to learn to advocate for themselves as well. So here's our contact information. We are available if you have any questions. You can reach out via phone or email. If we're not in your area, because we do have a lot of participation from throughout Pennsylvania, we can connect you with someone that is in your area. But at this time, I'll stop the recording and allow anybody, if they'd like to ask a question or if we have any questions in the chat.
Mm.